What's good, tinfoilers? Merrily We Go is the title of the third episode of the season, and after a couple of high-action episodes, we're taking a moment to slow down and perhaps set the table for the next series of major events. This episode is focused mainly on the remaining Matthews family members as they each start off on their separate journeys for answers. Sophie, aka the Man in Yellow, begins tearing the Fromville townies apart from within with lies and deceit, and things are already beginning to fray. Elgin and Fatima, surprisingly, have a new conspiracy of their own, and for Boyd, it's business as usual. The problems just keep on coming. I want to get this party started, but a quick shout out to the channel patrons is absolutely necessary for being the amazing human beings that they are. I'm forever grateful. And also a warm welcome to the latest addition to the Patreon. A special shout out goes to Rob Myers. Thank you so much for choosing to support the channel this way, and I hope you enjoy seeing your name in the closing credits going forward. Alright kids, you know what comes next. It's time to dive. Episode 3 begins with a scene between Elgin and Fatima at the Colony House. And as you can imagine, the wounds are still fresh for both parties. They share a secret on top of that whole sordid kidnapping affair. Elgin is clearly apologetic in this scene, while Fatima is more than gracious, even going as far as to ask him if he's doing okay. Now, Fatima doesn't blame Elgin as much as she blames the town for fooling him into doing what he did. But this scene ends with a teaser line about Fatima needing help with something from Elgin. Now, we do get a shot later in this episode showing that the two are working together on something. And whatever it is, it's gotta stay on the hush-hush. But it involves Elgin collecting a heap of dirt for her. Now, we all know that Fatima's past relationship with dirt has been interesting. Pregnancy can cause some weird cravings, I've heard. And Fatima has been known to dabble in the dirt during her pregnancy with the bouncing bundle of terror. But to see this, it makes you question whether or not Fatima has been permanently altered by her experience. Throughout this episode, Fatima expresses an uneasiness, a sense that she's just not right, and she seems to be having a problem, getting back to who she used to be. When you pair that with this, does that mean that she's no longer human or that she will never be the same again? These are serious questions. And then, of course, there's the relationship with the kimono lady. Some people seem to believe she may perhaps be a kimono lady in the making. Who knows? Now back over to Sheriff Boyd, who at the time was right in the middle of a flashback nightmare about the day he had to delete Abby after she lost her mind in town. Now this is a setup for later with Aosta. The main gist of this scene is that Aosta explains that she was getting cabin fever from being cooped up in this freak show of a town, and she snapped. It was out of character, according to her. Now Boyd's main concern is, will our loose cannon go off again and sink the ship? So he's got to know whether she's with it or not. Well, it turns out she's not doing so well. The prognosis is terrible because her response is to offer to go off into the woods and make an early exit. She just needs one round. Now at this moment, it becomes clear that this is probably similar to what happened to Abby, Boyd's deceased wife. You have a person whose whole life is about order and control being put in a situation where they suddenly have neither. I could see how this could be crazy making. And I think this scene was an attempt to soften the image of this character, and I would say it was a success. I think a lot of people are going to start feeling a little bit more sympathetic about this character. Now later on, Boyd brings her to a storage room with the idea that she could use her cop know-how to learn about what happened in this town by looking at the evidence. Is this busy work? Halfway, yes. But Boyd admits that he just wanted to help her and not see her go out like his deceased wife. The scene shows that Boyd doesn't have ill will towards her and that maybe there's hope for them. Who knows? Now remember that the Man in Yellow uses the personal belongings of dead people, and now we have Aosta looking into said stiffs. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Will Aosta figure out that Sophie is looking pretty good for a cadaver? Now over to one of the more shocking scenes in the episode. It's the moment when innocent Sophie is left alone with the priest body and she takes a souvenir. Let's hear that line one more time.
I couldn't let you go without something to remember you by.
So is that a cheeky one-liner or is it something else? The inference you could make here is that the Man in Yellow has a habit of taking parts of his victims as keepsakes. Monsters feel nostalgia too, I suppose. But what if this little memento is actually a tool he can use to take on this guy's appearance later on? Being the type of dude he is, this is probably his favorite way to remember people. The Man in Yellow might have a massive collection of items stashed around town like a drunk squirrel, filled with items to use his disgusting powers with. All right, so now we're gonna head over to Boyd and Jade, and Boyd is checking in to see if there's been any progress in solving the Fromville riddle. Currently, it's not looking good, but Jade has hopes that if he can trip balls, he will remember the memories locked away in his nugget, to which Boyd responds with, "Slow down." This is the part where we are reminded of the town's warning about digging for answers and what could come of it, which seems to be the theme of this episode as well. The writers are gearing us up for another phase of Looney Tunes levels of pain in the coming episodes. So, we get our first taste of the man in yellow as Sophie driving a wedge within the group. This is right after the burial ceremony across the way, and I gotta say, this was nasty work. Sophie sets up Cheney to look like he gave her vague information that led to her concluding that all of the bad stuff that has been happening is the Matthews' fault. They brought this into town by making a correlation between them showing up and the violence in town increasing. Obviously, they are not the cause of all of this, but that dagger hit the mark, and I'm guessing it won't be long before some of the folks in town start looking at the Matthews sideways and the conflicts begin. But also notice how she pushed Jade under this bus too, which makes perfect sense given that Jade and Tabitha are probably the biggest threats to the man in yellow's plans. He has to neutralize the threat, and this is probably the way he's gonna go about it, turn everyone against them. Now, one thing to make note of is the crows that show up at the service as it begins at the cemetery. When it comes to the crows, there is the obvious association we have in Western culture with death and bad omens. You could attribute it to that. But I think we can take this scene as a confirmation that the crows are indeed the eyes of whatever is watching over the town. We see them at these opportune moments. But what I find even more interesting is that we're never given a reason to believe that Sophie called the crows. So no solid confirmation just yet that the man in yellow is controlling all of these events. So after the diner scene blows up, Julie storms off. She's got a plan and she means business. Ethan takes off with Victor to go look for the Lake of Tears, which is probably the settlement lake, and Tabitha has plans of her own. She plans on heading back to the lighthouse. So every person surnamed Matthews is off on their own side quest once again. So the story is fragmenting a little bit. You've got all of these different arcs going on. Hopefully they come back together soon enough. Now, in the case of Ethan, he basically finesses Victor into helping him hunt down the location of the lake, despite Victor not thinking this was a good idea. Then, of course, we have Julie, who is set on using her powers to save Pops, but she wants to use Ethan's Chromonacle story as a reference, so she's gonna have to dig these books out of the collapsed house they used to live in back in season 1. No worries, as usual, Randall is up and at him, and he's the one who actually snags the books from the rubble for her. Notice all of the little teams forming up here. No complaints from me. Now, if Julie is right about the book being some kind of answer sheet for how to get out of here, it might also mean that Ethan also has some deeper connection to this place. Ethan does believe that his mother remembered the Red Rocks because she'd seen them before. So he's making the assumption that the Lake of Tears might exist because he's also seen it before. But that would mean that Ethan is remembering this place, which would mean that he's been here before too. Look, there's a lot of theories about this. There's even a theory that Ethan created this entire place because he's the one with the real powers, but that's a subject for another video. So on their adventure, Ethan and Vic head over to the Brundles first, but Ethan says this ain't it. Now Jade happens to be there and he's trying to free his memories, but he does end up joining their little expedition. Merrily We Go. Jade has a lot of questions, as he should. He's following a kid around in the woods looking for a lake from a fairy tale. I mean, we have to ask the question, was Jim really Jim, or was that the town trying to pull another fast one on Ethan? It's not like this town hasn't tried to test Ethan before. All right, so back over to Sophie. She needs a place to live, and when Cheney proposes that she move to the colony house, she immediately balks at the idea. And it makes sense that she wouldn't want to be around too many humans all day, given that she's not who she says she is. Now, she does seem to want to live with Sarah, and we can guess that this is because she knows Sarah is a controversial figure in town, and there's a lot of meat on those bones when it comes to the potential drama that this situation could create. Sophie even brings up the Sarah-Cheney beef during the conversation. She's just pouring buckets of salt on the wound here. Cheney can't catch a break. Now, Tabitha tries to sneak off to the portal tree after leaving a note for Donna, but Henry arrives in time to catch her. In short, she's trying to leave again. And Henry thinks this is a really risky move to make right now. So he's doing his best to try to convince her to drop this idea. Meanwhile, keep in mind that Henry doesn't know the truth about who Tabitha really is to him because she hasn't told him yet. I can't wait to see his face when he finds out. Now, when they get to the bottle tree, Henry has an emotional moment because he's seeing the place where his wife passed away. But then Tabitha tries to bounce. But once again, Henry does his best to change her mind because he's right. This might be a very bad idea because Tabitha doesn't have the lunchbox this time. Why does that matter? Well, it does if you believe in the theory that the bottle tree requires the traveler to have a number on them to arrive safely at their destination. This is the reason why she made it back to the real world the first time, allegedly. And it's also the reason why Dale took a cement nap instead. These numbers might be like tickets that take the traveler to specific places, and that's why they're kept dry and safe in bottles near the tree for would-be users to take advantage of. So this scene isn't over yet because the teen in white decides to check in, and his timing seems to be very important because this interruption seems to be what stops her from going through the tree. Now, when Tabitha asks him about going back to the real world like she did the last time, he seems to indicate that it might not work this time. So more bad news. But the one good bit of good news to take from this dialogue was that he says that they're really close to solving the puzzle. Okay, so now we need to discuss the moment when Victor spots the man in yellow's clothes in a pile in the woods while on their hunt for the Lake of Tears. This is a pretty chilling moment here, and Victor says so without saying a word. This scene confirms that the man in yellow has been around for a minute and was probably someone he ran into before the last massacre. In other words, he's seen what this man is capable of. And that's why he's so terrified. Once again, we see a crow that lands nearby for a close-up, and after that, Vic runs off and they catch up with him, and he says this.
I told myself it wasn't real. I told myself it wasn't real.
What did the man in yellow do that was so horrible that he was forced to pretend it never happened? It's not looking good for Fromville townies. But on another positive note, Jade finds what he's looking for. Pretty soon it's gonna be time to punch that ticket to outer space. Okay, so the final scene has Boyd at Abby's grave, and he's venting a little bit, talking about his problems, working stuff out, so to speak, and then he starts asking for her help. And this is when we spot what we can only assume is Abby's hand reaching up to grab his arm. Girl's got quite the grip strength. She almost yanks this man's arm off trying to pull him under. Now, what in the wide world of sports is happening here? This is most likely another vision or an attack by the town meant to shake him up a bit, and it wouldn't be the first time the town has used Abby to try to mess with Boyd. Which is, again, why I'm not so sure we can trust Ghost Jim either. So I think what we're seeing here is the town is turning up the crazy. It's going to be an interesting season. So that's it for this episode. It was slower than the first two, but that's because this story needs to set the table for the real horror that they've been promising since the trailers dropped. I am looking forward to that. If you enjoyed this video, you already know what to do. Thank you so much for watching. As always, a special thank you to the channel patrons and the entire Tinfoil gang. Always remember to be kind to yourself, be safe out there. And until next time, off you go.